Hello, everyone. I'm here with Crystal, the doula, today. Hi, Crystal.
Oh, hey, how's it going?
Good. So you are you are a birth and postpartum doula,
Yeah.
as well as a placenta encapsulator.
Yes.
Yes. And that is what we're talking about today.
Yeah.
And I really want to hear your story of why you chose to do this.
Yeah.
But just real quick, first of all, for those who may not know, most of you will definitely know what the placenta is, which is the organ that is developed in uterus for your baby during pregnancy. And then after the baby is born, the placenta is born. And it's done its thing for the baby. But where the encapsulating part comes in is you can actually encapsulate the placenta and it becomes this beautiful gift for the mama, for her well-being. But we're going to get into all that.
Yes. No, that was a really good, Cliff Notes version of what the placenta is, though. Yeah.
And then I'm going to let you dive deep into it. But how did you come across placenta encapsulation, and what made you decide to make it a part of your life?
Yeah. Well, I've been a birth and postpartum doula for about 2 years. And of course, we heard about it in our training. And at the time, I was a very statistically based thinker. That's what made me feel valid and comfortable in things. So when I first went and did the research, as we'll talk about later, there are very few studies, none of which have developed any conclusive and assured information or data. So I decided not to do it. I decided not to take a training and add it to my services list. And then I had a postpartum client I was working with who was just kind of having all of the textbook difficulties that one can undergo in early postpartum with early stages of mood disorder, difficulty bonding with baby because of difficulty bonding with baby, having a little bit of trouble with milk coming in and things like that. And I had remembered that she mentioned to me she was getting her placenta encapsulated. This was about a weekend. And I reminded her and she was like, oh, I totally forgot that I had those, and started taking them. Then I saw her 2 days later and it was like I was looking at a different person. And it was just the most, to see it in person like that was very mind blowing. And I remember that night I was like, I have to find a training on this, because I suffered from postpartum depression, and I had no idea what placenta encapsulation was when I had my daughter. And so after knowing what that struggle can be like, and then seeing that just 100 or 360 switch in my client, I was like, gotta definitely figure out how to do this. And then I've just seen it repeatedly. I get those texts, those emails all the time from clients that I'm not even anything for them but a placenta encapsulator. And they're like, oh my God, I was so afraid of this happening. I felt the stuff creeping in. And then I started taking my placenta and everything changed. So that's how I stumbled across this, from some real life interaction with what it can do.
Right. That is so amazing. And you've been doing it for a couple of years now?
Yeah, a little over a year and a half. Yeah, I was a couple months into my practice before I had that client.
Yeah. I encapsulated my placenta with both kids. So I actually don't know what it's like to not have it. I only know the benefits of having it. And for me personally, it just my mood was very balanced. Milk supply was fantastic.
Yeah.
I just feel like it just helped me stay balanced and happy. And I'm even one of the weirdos who turned it into a smoothie. I did the placenta smoothie for the first 2 days.
Hard in the paint.
And that's the part where my friends are like, oh, cool, encapsulation, yeah, but the smoothie, that's where I lose them.
Yeah, that's where most people, you lose some people at capsules. I'll even show them pictures. I'm like, oh, this looks like a vitamin. They're like, nope.
Yeah, no, it grosses people out. And all I can do is just swear by my experience and the fact that taking the smoothie the first 2 days was absolutely incredible. But again, we will get into that. So first, what is the placenta? What makes it so magical for the baby, first of all?
So first of all, I feel like the most magical thing about it is that your body grows it to serve one purpose and then just discards it once it's that's wild. Even just that, in 9 months, your body has created this full-on organ, and then it's just all right, I'm done now. But secret being that once it's done, not really, because you can utilize it so many other ways. But for the baby, so it's the way that the baby gets transferred nutrients, oxygen transfers that way, and that is how baby's waste is filtered out. So that's what it does for baby. During gestation, it does. I wouldn't say it does much for the birthing person, but it does. Oh my God, I'm having that brain fart we were talking about. I swear, brain
all day long.
It's like the thoughts there, and then it's just gone.
Yeah, and then it just goes away. No, completely. I'm with you.
Okay, so for the birthing person, it houses all of the hormones. That's what I was going to say. So we know like hormones kind of run the show while you're pregnant. The majority of that surplus of hormones is stored in the placenta. And so, I mean, in that way, I guess that's what helps you keep a healthy pregnancy. It's what helps you stay well while you're gestating, which takes a ton of energy. So yeah, those are the things it does during gestation.
Which is, I mean, that's just like pure magic, like you said. The fact that the body just grows this organ, which is not a small organ either.
It is not.
And then it comes out, baby's birthed, and then the placenta is birthed. And what happens in most cases in this day and era is that it's tossed.
Yep.
It just goes in the garbage, and that's it. And we are learning, actually humans have known this for a very, very, very long time, and animals know it really well. We'll get to that too. Mm-hmm. But it's becoming more and more trendy now to actually hold on to the placenta and encapsulate it.
Right.
So I think I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but let's just do it. What are the possible benefits now for the birthing mama that the placenta has to offer?
Okay, so this is what kind of like prefaces the whole kind of placenta situation, is that when it comes to studies that have been done, data that has been collected, they haven't really been able to prove anything either way. So when it comes down to it, it's mostly, I just want to give this like a preface. I'm not saying that these are things that have been scientifically found. It's more so like there was one study that was done by the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, where they took 190 or so women, had them all encapsulate and take their placentas, and then just like recorded their experience. And then you'll have studies where they actually will go into the placenta and like try and see how much waste transferred from the baby gets trapped in the placenta, how much of the hormones actually remain in the placenta after birth, and how did that benefit the body. In terms of that scientific study, they haven't really found much. So I just want to preface it with that. But the things that lots of people across the world have claimed it does, and things that I have seen with my own two eyes, is helping with postpartum mood disorders. And I believe that's most likely due to if I were to speculate, I'd say it's due to the hormones, because that does play a really big role in how your brain stabilizes its chemicals. Increased energy, increased iron after a lot of blood loss, no matter what way baby's born. Helping with milk supply. I think those are the top hitters, I think. And those are the things that I saw, and also like bonding with baby as well, which there's actually a really interesting study that was done by this guy in New York City, where he took this species of rats who don't typically rush to nourish their young, or emotionally nourish their young after birth. And then this guy encapsulated or dehydrated a human placenta and was giving it to the mother rat. And he was recording the behavior, and these rats that typically don't emotionally nourish their young at birth were much more involved. Then he was like experimenting it with giving it to the siblings and giving it to the father, and same reaction with all of them. And I think there's a similar reaction that happens for humans, because it does also assist with those high oxytocin levels with bonding with baby, if that's something that you're struggling with. And that's usually kind of like a sub symptom of postpartum mood disorders, like postpartum depression or postpartum psychosis and stuff like that. That
is so incredibly interesting. And I would say I noticed help in all those areas when I started taking my pills. and my smoothies. And what was really cool, actually, it helps so much in that fourth trimester. But another magic part is that it can help you with anything hormonal or whatever it might be for the rest of your life. Mm-hmm. And the co-founder of Amma, my business partner, Satya, she's a very happy, like I told you on our phone call, she's a very happy, upbeat person, can do, just sees possibilities everywhere she goes. Sure. And then she started to experience a little bit of depression during this crazy time that we live in, right? And she didn't know what to do with it. And her husband reminded her that she still had some of her placenta pills, which she started taking, and it totally kicked the depression out of her. And it's kind of, there's like no doubt that they helped. And we're going to get to this towards the end of this as well, but it's something that can help you during menopause, and it can even help your child when they deal with hormonal stuff. So the benefits are many. I feel like people still have, because there aren't a lot of research out there that either support or oppose this tradition. But people kind of want to know what their risks are, which is totally understandable. So I just want to touch on what the risks could be. I feel like some people are nervous about bacteria. We actually have one community question here. I call it community questions. They're questions from our mamas and women in our community. And one mama said, I've read that aside from amazing nutrients, it has the toxins of the placenta filter as well. Is this true or false?
Yeah. I can address that. So I actually slightly misspoke earlier when I was saying that there hasn't really been anything proven good or bad, beneficial or risky. And that's only slightly untrue by the fact that one of those studies that was looking into the hormone levels and the toxin levels in the placenta to see how concentrated they were, how much of them there are, and how likely they were to survive digestion, get into the milk, and negatively affect baby in any way. They actually did discover that in terms of the toxins, the levels that were found could in no way be harmful. So I guess technically they've proved that there is maybe not no risk at all, but definitely not that specific risk. But whoever this person is who asked the question, totally valid, because there was a case study released by the CDC after there was an instance where a mama did not test GBS positive, the group beta streptococcus. She did not test positive in pregnancy. But then once the baby was born, baby tested positive. And so the baby was in NICU for several days, and this mama did encapsulate her placenta. So baby was in NICU for several days, then went home, and then was readmitted to NICU for group beta strep again. And so the CDC, as they do sometimes with the better safe than sorry backing, or just don't do it because that's probably how it happened. But the reality of the situation is that there was never any data gathered or any concrete hypothesis formed as to whether it could survive digestion and get into the milk and have been the thing. They didn't consider whether maybe the first infection just didn't go away, whether they got the infection from another family member at home. So there's so many stipulations that when you're looking at a public service announcement that they don't put on there, it's just don't encapsulate your placenta because this baby got GBS. And so when you're looking at something like that, that's how things get started, that are just it can hold bacteria and it can hold toxins from this. And I feel completely comfortable encapsulating GBS positive placentas, even after seeing something like that, because they didn't really find much at all. It's one of those maybe if she hadn't done this, that wouldn't have happened.
Mm-hmm. Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a tough thing to battle, and I completely, people find their validity in different places. For me, seeing that one client in front of my face was enough compared to all of the stuff that you can find online, all of the studies that have been done. And then there's the placebo effect thing people will pretty consistently bring up. They're like, well, what if it's just placebo effect? And it's well, if they're having a positive postpartum experience, does it really matter? And if there's nothing been proven that is going to like surely harm them or even have a high risk of harming them, even with bacteria in the traditional Chinese method, there's a steaming step and a dehydrating step, even if you don't do the steaming. And at those high temperatures, they found that bacteria or any bacteria that will be harmful enough to be concerned about will not survive that process. So even if it is placebo, it's like, you only get one placenta, you know, and I think it's better to do it than to not, in my opinion, given that information.
So true. And we'll talk a little bit about what it actually is, like the process of encapsulating the placenta.
Yeah, totally.
But just to piggyback off of what you were saying, I think, you know, we're obviously not here to tell mamas that this is what you should be doing. I think, like as with anything, even how you choose to birth and the birth plan that you end up deciding on, it's all about following your gut feeling.
Right.
It feels right to you. 100%. If eating your placenta is not your thing, then it's not your thing. You'll be fine. And so will your baby.
Right.
But I do think it's important that people know that this is an option.
Right.
Because it is an amazing option. At least that's what I firmly believe.
So do I. Yeah.
And I want mothers to be able to have the choice.
Right. I think feeling confident in the choice too, because I feel like more so than I'm trying to prop it up as this thing that I think everyone should do, it's just I'm trying to like play a little pushback of devil's advocate to the things that make people feel hesitant about its usefulness or helpfulness if you need it. Because I think that there is much more of the latter than there are people being like, totally, it's great, it works, it's beneficial. But yeah, 100%, I think trusting your gut and just doing what's best for your pregnancy, your postpartum, always.
Mm-hmm. So we were talking about research, and you know, like we keep saying, there's not like a lot of research out there that says it's this or it's this. What would you say? How then can you make your research? Like how can you get as educated as you possibly can be to make this decision? What would you recommend other than just Googling, which can be a dangerous place to go? Sometimes a really good place to go. But what are other ways that people can find out enough to then make their decision?
That is a really good question. I feel like it has a twofold answer just because I think it depends on the type of person that you are.
Yeah.
I think that if you're the type of person who finds a lot of validity in statistics and research, and that's what makes you feel safe in your decisions, I feel like a good place to start is evidencebasedbirth.com. They have everything you could possibly think of. And all of it's all very neutral and very unbiased. It's not going to the CDC and it's not going to your woo-woo friend who's making placenta smoothies. It's kind of like the middle ground. They just state the facts. And if that's what you're looking for, that's where you can find that. Other than that, I think that just, if it's something you're interested in and you're not absolutely sure if there are people in your community who have gone through it, I think that instead of Googling for statistics, Googling for stories, firsthand accounts, posting on your social medias, being like, hey, has anyone in my circle done this? What were your results? If you're that type of person, I think do that. If you're kind of middle of the road, do both and then make whatever decision feels right to you. I think at the end of the day, and this might just be because I'm a doula and I'm big on like trusting your intuition and reestablishing your power. I think that at the end of the day, whatever your gut is telling you is where you should go. I feel like it's especially, I think your mother's intuition grows in you much before your baby is born. And I think that your gut and your intuition is very, very strong in gestation. So trusting that ultimately, I think is a good way to go.
I fully agree with you. So let's talk about the process of placenta encapsulation. You were talking a little bit about steaming and dehydrating. What do you do? How does it work?
So I do the traditional Chinese method, and I'm actually not sure if they're different or if they're just different ways of doing the TCM method. But in my training, I learned so first you clean it out really well, try to get a good amount of the blood out of it just because it can sometimes like cause constipation or make your belly a little bit upset if you don't get enough of the blood out of it before you dehydrate it. So you wash it. And then one method is to steam it with warming herbs like some people use like hot peppers, ginger, lemongrass, rosemary, lemon, stuff like that. You steam it for like 20 minutes and it'll like shrink down and kind of just like a weird piece of meat. And then you slice it really thin, put it out in a dehydrator, and then it's usually like 12 to 14 hours until you can like snap it like a chip. And then the other method of that, which is actually what I practice now, is kind of the more raw method of that. So you skip the steaming step. And you just slice the placenta very thin from raw and dehydrate it that way. And it does take more time in the dehydrator because of the moisture. It hasn't lost moisture from the steaming process. But same thing, dehydrate it so you can snap it like a chip. Then I put it like in a NutriBullet. No, not the NutriBullet that I use for my normal kitchen. I get that question so much and I'm like, no, it's a separate one. And you grind it into a powder and then I put mine into vegan capsules just in case I have clients who have dietary restrictions. And that's it. That's the whole process. You keep things really sterile. I use as many single-use materials as I can. And then the things that I do use every time, I go through a pretty thorough sterilization process before and after every placenta that I encapsulate. But like back in the day, their version of that was once the placenta was born, they would wash it and do like rituals over it and then throw it in a bowl and stick it in the sun until it was dried out. And then they would probably like mortar and pestle, grind it into a powder. That actually, there's an interesting thing about traditional Chinese medicine is it actually wasn't just for the birthing person. It was an actual medicine. They would give it, I don't know very much about qi and like Jing and your yin and all of that stuff, but that's what the placenta more so was used for rather than postpartum healing. It was used for like energy blockages for anyone in the family that the placenta came from, which when I discovered that, I thought that was super, super interesting. Because it's the life giver. It's the thing that keeps life flowing and constant during your pregnancy. And they saw that as like after it was born, it can continue to like enforce energy, if you were to ingest it. So that's the traditional Chinese method.
That is so cool. And I had my doula take care of everything. Like she was the one who took the placenta and then she chopped up a few pieces for the smoothie, and then she put she put everything in the freezer, and then we used the rest for encapsulating it. So that's what I love about doulas. You guys are so not afraid of like getting some blood on your hands. It's like, it's nothing to you. And I'm really proud of my husband, who was the one who made me those smoothies.
Yeah, you told me that. I was like, rock on. I feel like I battle a lot of husbands in my career at this point. It's like gross and don't feel comfortable with it. So kudos to your
right? So that's one thing. This was a great question from one of our people here. She said, how does it work logistically? How does the placenta get to the placenta encapsulator? Which is a great question, because how do you get the placenta from these moms? Yeah,
that's another like multiple fold question. So first I'll start by saying that if you are someone who's considering encapsulating your placenta, I think the first thing you should do before you marry yourself to the idea is check and make sure that it's legal in your state. Because unfortunately, and in my opinion, very stupidly, they will claim your placenta as like not yours or as like hazardous medical waste, and it's actually illegal to remove it from the hospital. So there's that. But even in places like LA and in the state of California where it's completely legal, doulas and placenta encapsulators do have to jump through several hoops sometimes still even to get their placenta. So if you do live in a state where it is legal, still I would make sure that whoever your care provider is, that you continuously mention it during your pregnancy. Make sure you know all of the policies, if there are forms you need to sign, if there are some hospitals will have a time limit where it has to leave within an hour of it being born, things like that. But in terms of how I'll go pre-COVID and now COVID. Pre-COVID, you would just be able to kind of go into the hospital once they were in postpartum and pick it up from them in person. Now, because they are limiting the amount of people that go in and out of the hospital, it's kind of created an extra challenge because someone has to bring it down to us. And also with a lot of the hospitals having time limits, it puts the doulas in another like severely on-call situation. But yeah, I mean, once the placenta is born, they'll put it usually in a bowl. And typically they'll have a whiteboard up if you're delivering in a hospital where you can write down all of your preferences, but it's still good to remind whatever team is in there, like, hey, don't let that leave the room, because also a lot of encapsulators will not encapsulate a placenta that's left the room just because they don't know what it's come in contact with, or they just don't know what's happened to it, so it's unsafe for them and possibly for the parents as well. But yeah, so it's once they put it in that bowl, you just kind of remind them, hey, I'm taking this with me. And usually without any fuss, they will put it just like on ice for you in a little like hazardous waste bag and then in another container. What I've been recommending clients do during COVID is, just in case, have a cooler like in their trunk with tons of ice packs, or have a cooler and then ask the hospital for several bags of ice, just to be able to keep it, because keeping it cold is very important. It can go rancid just like any other piece of meat. But yeah, so they either keep it until they can pick it up, or sometimes they'll have a family member pick it up if the doula can't make it for some reason. And the family member will just keep it in the fridge until the doula can come get it. It lasts, I think, 3 to 5 days. I think it's 3 days in the fridge. Don't quote me on this. And 5 days if it's been frozen before you can go through with the encapsulation process. And again, don't quote me. I'm not absolutely sure. But just like any other meat, it has a shelf life.
Right.
But yeah, that's typically, there are several ways it can go down, but it really just depends on the policies of the hospital and sometimes the laws in the state where you are giving birth.
Thank you for mentioning that. It's so good to know. Like, if you are in a state, even where it is legal, you still have to make sure that everybody knows what your plan is.
Right.
As with anything else. So we touched a little bit on the history of it, and I don't know if you want to add anything, but several cultures consume the placenta, and they've done so for a very, very long time. Yeah. It's not like a new trendy thing. It has a long background in history.
Yeah. It has a long background.
In the animal kingdom all the time, where animals eat their placenta. Yeah. So, is there anything that you want to add to that about the fact that it's not new?
Yeah, I mean, there's not much to add because, again, kind of like the research, if you were to go back in history, there aren't many recorded incidences of the placenta being consumed, but kind of like other things that get passed down through cultures and ancestry, it is known that it's been done for a really long time. It's definitely not new. I think the most recent upswing of it that we can attribute to being where we are right now was in the 80s. I think with the 80s is when it became like very popular again. And then of course with celebrities like Kim Kardashian and like other people doing it. I mean, that's a surefire way to make something a trend. But then also in terms of like the history and the background, another COVID brain fart.
Yes, bring him on. I'm not the only
one. I was so nervous about it in the beginning of quarantine, and now I'm like, everyone is going through.
Everyone has it. I have to have a cup of coffee before every single Zoom call, or I will zoom out, which is pun intended.
It's absolutely insane. I can't remember what I was going to say.
Making so much sense. I'm with you.
Yeah, and you have 2 kids, dude. People with kids, I'm like, thank God I'm not responsible for small humans right now.
A puppy. I don't know. Well, there we go. Now I can't even remember what we were talking about. Do you remember?
We were talking about the
80s.
The history.
Yeah.
How far back it goes.
And what happened in the 80s. Anyway,
I have one other thing to add, and now I can't remember. If it comes back, I'll bring it up.
I would love to hear more about, because now we've talked about the encapsulating, and I keep bringing up my smoothies. You can consume it in many different ways. But you mentioned before on our phone call, tinctures.
Yes.
And how they can be used for a long time and actually even help you in menopause.
Yep.
And how it can be given to your child. Please, let's dig into that a little bit.
Yeah. So I would love to say I have as extensive of a knowledge about tinctures as I do about the placenta as an organ and encapsulation, but I'm still kind of buffing up on that. But it's something that I've seen. So I just was like, I'm going to add it and I'll learn about it as I go. But what the tincture is you take like a quarter size piece of the placenta and then you steep it in 100 proof vodka for 6 weeks. And then you can just use it as like little drops. And so long as you keep replenishing the 100 proof vodka and the flesh never gets exposed to oxygen, it really does have like an unlimited shelf life. So it's a way to really make those benefits of your capsules that usually a placenta will yield somewhere between like 80. And I think the most I've had is like 190 something capsules. It might go higher than that. That's just my range that I've experienced. But once those are gone, those are gone. So a lot of people will choose to do the tincture. It can help with like if your first menstrual cycle after having the baby, if you have like a very intense luteal phase where you're just having all the mood swings and stuff, can really help like that with that, like a few drops under the tongue. The thing that I witnessed that I thought was the most incredible was I had a client who this was her 3rd pregnancy and she had a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old. And the 4-year-old was starting preschool one of the weeks that I was doing postpartum care with them and was having a lot of anxiety and a lot of panic. She had her tinctures and she would put like 3 or 4 drops in his juice every morning before it went to school. And I would literally see this kid go from like bonkers off the wall, like crying and just like, I can't go by myself, to like, not like ready to go, but like chilling, just kind of like, all right, I had this, I'm gonna do it, I'm gonna do it. And it was just wild. And 4-year-olds, I mean, they're 4-year-olds. So it was very interesting to see that. So there's that. And then there's also, like you mentioned, menopause, where when you're going through those hormonal fluctuations and your body's trying to kind of find its new normal, similarly to postpartum, it kind of like takes the edge off. Helps with the hormonal balance, helps with the mental balance, with a lot of the side effects of hormonal imbalance, or not imbalances, but changes like sweat, like the hot flashes and stuff like that. So yeah, the tincture is another great option for those benefits, like having longevity, which is pretty sick.
I so wish I would have made a tincture. I didn't. I mean, I got to use both my placentas and so happy for it, but it would have been so cool to still have a tincture that I can use. And, you know, you can even use it for your kids when they go through puberty, and it's just like anything like that. How amazing if we had that. It's so incredible. So let's dig into a few of I've asked some of the questions from our community. But here's a mama asking, can it harm your milk supply?
That is one of those things, like I mentioned earlier, hasn't necessarily been proven that it doesn't, but also the toxins and the things that could potentially stick around from filtering waste during the pregnancy. They did do those tests to see if they were in high enough quantities to negatively affect you or the baby, and it was no. The answer was no. Right. So I would speculate that the answer is no. Mm-hmm. Even in the CDC GBS positive situation that I was explaining, there were so many factors that they didn't explore, and it was more of a better safe than sorry claim than anything really factually data evidence based.
Right. And what I can say is the moms that I know that have been consuming their placenta, it really does help with milk flow and milk supply. It helps tremendously.
Oh, yeah.
And here's a good question, and I actually saw a little bit about it in my research as well. Do it yourself versus having a professional do it. I would never trust myself to do it, but I know that it's possible. If you have the right tools, you could technically do all of this yourself.
Yeah.
It's a very specific process though, isn't it? If you want to make it right.
Yes. If you want to it's more so wanting to make it safe. if that makes sense. Because it's really not super complicated. It's not like physically complicated, or like remembering the steps to do it is not very complicated. But, and it also, when you're early postpartum, like, I don't know if this is people that have already had children and know what the postpartum period is like and feel like they can handle it. But if you are someone who has never experienced early postpartum, if you want to do it properly and sterilely and safely, it does take a lot of effort in terms of setup and cleaning, and it's a lot. It is a lot. It's time consuming. The typical price, I feel like in LA, I think like 300 is usually like the middle ground of high. I think the most I've seen is like 400. I charge 350 because it's time consuming. It takes several days. And when you have a new baby, you don't got a lot of time on your hands. And if you do have that time, it's typically better used showering or sleeping. So having someone be able to do that for you, it takes away the factor of not being sure if it's sterile and safe. And also just, you don't have to worry about it. And also the materials are not cheap, and they're not typically materials people just have laying around, like a dehydrator and a pill maker or a encapsulating machine. Like, I mean, if you do,
amazing.
Yeah, but it's not like the materials aren't cheap, so you'd be spending maybe not the exact same amount, but close to it. If you're going to just add a little more to the cost and have it done for you, I feel like it takes away a lot of the strife. Not to say it's not possible, though. Totally is. If I can do it, you can do it. It's just I'm not early postpartum. I don't have a baby to take care of, and I'm going to sleep with no issue every night. So.
Oh, that sounds amazing.
Right? I'm sorry. I mean to like.
You are such a gem. That was very helpful, that last answer, and it makes perfect sense.
Well,
you're incredible. Thank you so much for shining light on this. I feel like a lot of people, like we said in the beginning, are starting to get curious, but they really don't know what it is. And it's always that fear of, is it safe or is it not? So I feel very happy that we were able to shine some light on it. And I hope more mamas try it. I really, really do, if it feels right.
If it feels right. And I am an open book, and my email is on my website. You can DM me if you find me on Instagram. And I'll love to
find you on Instagram, if you wouldn't mind sharing your...
this is how my pandemic brain goes. I can't even remember my own Instagram handle. So that's where I'm at. Crystal with a K, KRYSTAL _ the doula. So Crystal _ the doula. And my website, it's tagged in my Instagram, but it's just crystalthedoula.com. And my email is crystalthedoula@gmail.com. All very easy to remember. But yeah, hit me up. I'm all about wanting to educate people and helping support people in making empowered and educated decisions, no matter what it comes to. So hit me up.
Amazing. Hit her up. You're incredible. Thank you so much for your time.
Yes, thank you so much.
It was fun and so awesome. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.